I am a writer, and a writer needs a quiet and distance. So I would like to get return to
So
that.
soon, yeah, I suppose soon. So, the book, like I was saying, it's so many things. It's so layered. It's got so many characters with their idiosyncrasies. But broadly put, I would say, it's about this mother who's aging about 80ish mother, Ma, Amma, Bibi, Baiji, and her family, and the two relationships she has. This one friendship with Rosie Bua, Rosie, who's a transgender person, and her daughter, who's just called Beti. In fact, most characters in the book are just called Beti, Bahu, Beta, and there are no names really. Is that broadly how one could describe the book?
Well, like you said in the beginning, in fact, two things you said. One, you said a writer at her peak, and I suddenly saw myself hurtling downhill after that. So I hope that's not happening. I hope I'm not on that kind of peak.
No, no,
So
not at all. I'm
that's
sure
one.
there are more.
But no, but you also said it's a book which is difficult to sort of just define and decide that this is what it is about. I mean, and I think that in some ways is an important comment. One, why is it necessary to define it so clearly? This is what the thematic is. I think creative works can represent and reflect different kinds of reality.
Yes.
And we do have a complex reality which is about lots and lots of things. And this book happens to be about a lot of things. So you are saying primarily the relationship of mother and daughter and mother and Rosie, okay? But it's also a relationship of, mother and son.
Yes.
For
Yeah.
me, that is also a relationship I felt very close to as I wrote the book. It's also about the relationship with inanimate objects. So
Yeah.
actually, if you ask my opinion, I would like to think it's about lots and lots of relationship, lots of directions, much as life is full of these.
Yeah, I mean, like for instance, anything can play any role. I mean, the walls, for instance, I mean, you describe how they contract, they expand as you move from house to house, how things. So, yeah, so it's her relationship with inanimate objects too. That is very interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and also, you see, inanimate objects, we very easily divide the world into animate and inanimate. But inanimate objects that we live with or that have seen a lot of life, have seen a lot of history, how can they remain inanimate? They
Correct.
acquire a soul and an entity of their own. And they surely,
Yeah.
I am imagining it, but it is like a door under which so many members of the family have constantly gone, under it, crossed it, across that threshold with
Yeah.
all kinds of, politics and emotions and confusions. So how can that door not be a witness? Or the road, the Grand Trunk Road, which
Yeah.
figures in this book,
Yeah.
which has seen so much happening on it from, the whole range from happy moments of revelry, caravans of revelry to, for instance, the partition moments of a lot of inhumanity and bloodshed.
Yes.
For me, that road just comes alive. It becomes a witness to all that human beings are doing to each other, have experienced in all these centuries. So I think inanimate objects acquire life
Absolutely,
as the
yeah,
book goes along.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you said, when one visits a monument, when you can hear the war cries of the past, what all the walls and the doors would have witnessed. Of course, the songs, the dance, and all that. Yeah, that's true. That so
Where do all the murmurs and whispers of the past go?
go.
I think they go into these nooks and crannies and they're waiting there and giving it, so much echoes and so much soul.
Hmm. But that absolutely. But one of the most the well-defined relationship, let's say, is between the
Sure.
yeah. So and in fact, between the mother and the daughter, also in the book, in the beginning, the daughter is taking care of the mother because she's aging and she's worried about her health, about her various her trips to the hospitals, etc. But as you read on, how the mother towards the end, I mean the daughter is kind of confused, and she's actually the one who needs caring, and so those, those shifts in the relationship, that's again something so well etched.
I mean, I suppose there's humor and irony in that. That is how a lot of relationships do. Also, that is the trajectory of a lot of relationships, where one party somehow assumes that they are in control and they are running the other, and they also sometimes can be patronizing about it.
Yes.
And bit by bit, as life unfolds, they may or may not realize that it's actually the other party which is running them, and they are the ones who are, in some sense, in better control, and they are the ones who are, this party which thought it was controlling is the one which is getting dispersed, and actually the weaker party. So I think there's a kind of tongue-in-cheek
Yes,
treatment of
oh
that.
yeah, and I must say, I mean, the book is uproariously funny, and it's, I mean, and also shatteringly heartbreaking at times, and very violent in many cases. But it's there is never a dull moment. I mean, it's really a page turner, even though it's such a big book. It's but Geetanjali ji, the relationship and how they change that you talked about. It's there right from your first novel, Mai, which also I just read, which is in English translation, is now available. Even there, the daughter, thinks that she's the mother is this weak lady, who's always bent and who needs caring. Even the son, and yet actually in the, even in Mai, it's the how it goes up and down, and she's actually not so weak in the end, and she's probably emotionally much stronger than the daughter and the son.
Yeah, you see, I mean, these are things which come out of a observation and sensitivity, and I hope a writer's sensitivity, which gets honed as we live along. So I think what I have given importance to in all my years of writing is not just what is outside and obvious, but inner lives and inner flows of people. So when you talk of this first novel, Mai, I mean, already there is this feeling for what lies behind a woman who looks subordinate, who looks silent, who looks like she is the puppet in the
Yes,
hands
always
of everybody
sacrificing.
else, yes, and in a patriarchal society. And already there's a questioning of that, because nobody is just a puppet, and nobody is just an empty receptacle where people are filling in whatever they want to. She has her own agency, she has her own ways of doing things. I mean, life is so much about negotiations and navigations, and we miss out on those because we only recognize what is very visible and audible and very obvious. So I think it's that kind of basic questioning which seems to guide me along a lot of my writing. And I never thought of, that this book is a sequel to Mai. I never thought
No,
like
no,
that.
no.
But people say that, it is as if Mai has risen up and now it's
Yes,
her
there seems to be
other
some
innings.
connection,
Yeah.
maybe unconscious,
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
The other part, the other sentiment that one gets when in Mai particularly, it's the the patriarchy that you mentioned. It's how you deal with it in the book. It's not like in your face. I mean, they seem to be very honorable men. They seem to be very decent people. The father, the son, the brother, and yet the day-to-day patriarchy that is there in households, that the kind that you describe. That again, it's, I think, like I said, without saying it, it's so strong.
Well, I think subtlety is an important part of, sensitivity. You have to see that things are, I mean, and I think one of the biggest weaknesses of isms of various kinds is that they see everything in black and white.
Right.
And if it is in black and white, it becomes very easy to fight the evil. It is much more difficult and much more, spread out and permeating in our society when it is also gray and dispersed. People have such mixed selves in them. They have this and that. Like you said, within patriarchy, there are different kinds of men. Within patriarchy, there are different kinds of women. And being able to sensitize yourself to that. One brings out the richness of human beings and their relationships, also makes it that much more difficult.
Hmm.
So I think sensitive writing would point to both
Hmm.
these things.
Hmm. Hmm. The other thing, Geetanjali ji, is from my to the journey to this book. It seems like there you describe this a very typical, I think UP Madhya Pradesh kind of a North Indian household, which is fairly well to do, huge number of servants, and there are khet and kalihan and mangoes being put in these big tubs to cool, and then you sort of eat them. From there you move now to it's a joint family also in many ways, and then you move here, it's more towards the city. It's more, the family is getting smaller, there are only fewer people to relate to. Is that a journey that you've kind of you pass through yourself? And it's also journey, I think, of most people
Yeah.
of our
I
generation.
mean, to some extent, it's just reflecting the journey around me and mine, where we are moving from smaller towns to bigger towns and the metropolis. And yes, indeed, we move from independent homes with some
Yeah.
grounds around and, several retainers and so-called the service, set of people.
Hmm.
But we moved from that to apartments
Yeah.
ultimately, and I think that is a journey all of us know. And in fact, even in the smaller towns, as the earlier generation is going, the
Yeah.
bungalows are turning into
Yeah.
multi-storied buildings and apartments.
Hmm.
So it's a very familiar and very real
Hmm.
journey that all of us
Hmm.
know. So I think it's very natural for it to come into the
And
book.
is it also with a sense of loss of a life, of a time, of an era? Or you think, there were also many ills at that time, there were also many so many things we couldn't do that we can in a city.
Sense of loss can be there along with the recognition that there were problems also in that time. So again, I would say it's not a black and white
Yeah.
situation,
Hmm.
but a slower time. For instance, the childhood of the children in Mai, in a house where they were still close to nature.
Yeah.
Now there were many things wrong. I mean, there was a feudal kind of atmosphere. There's a patriarchal atmosphere. There's inequality between men and women, between classes. So they're also growing up in that,
Yeah.
and perhaps realizing those ills of society and hopefully learning from those. But they're also living much more in nature than later children are.
Correct.
And that is indeed something, which has to be felt bad about too.
Hmm.
I always think, I don't know if I've written about that in Rate Samadhi, but I do think quite often, that one of the worst things we've done in modern life is to dwarf the trees. When in my childhood, the trees were
I
above us,
can't agree with you more. I mean,
so
especially,
the level,
yeah,
it already did
yeah,
something. We would look up
yeah,
at the
yeah,
top like that, and if
yeah,
we could never see the absolute top of the tree. And today
absolutely.
we are looking down out of our window, and
Yeah,
the trees are dwarfs below us,
yeah,
and there's something, I
yeah,
think, very, very seriously wrong
yeah.
and objectionable there.
Absolutely. In fact,
So
absolutely. When in the Mughal, the Akbar Samadhi, the Maqbara in, I think, Agra, if you go, I didn't know that there were Ashok trees. They are gigantic. They have let them grow. And in a city like Delhi, I mean, you make them as hedges. I mean, it's cropped from here and there. It's such a violation of nature in that sense. Yeah, it's absolutely. These are the things. Yeah, I mean, that's completely shocking. Geetanjali, I just wanted to know that when you read the book, it seems like I mean, there's no plot and it's going here, there. In fact, I wanted to say that if I kept the book here for a bit, it seemed like it'll sprout wings and just fly off. It's like, but when you write, is it, how is that process? I mean, do you set, I mean, do you have a plot line, or is it very stream of consciousness and, character develops itself and it's not where you intended him or her to go, but she's going. Is it like that, or how? What if you if you want to tell the audience a little bit
Well,
about?
again, I would say I will not put it in either or
Mm.
category. I do remember what Krishna Sopti, one of my absolute favorite writers and somebody I,
Yeah.
absolutely revered. Um, she had somebody. I mean, I just remember we were sitting somewhere together, and someone, like a journalist, I think, just asked her, "The Krishna ji, when you write, do you have it worked out? The beginning and then where it'll go and so on." And she just answered. She kind of smiled and looked at all of us, and she looked at him and she said, "What is the fun of writing if I know where it's going?" you
True.
know. So I think that line is the kind of line which has stayed with me because it says so much. It says so much about our creativity. It says so much about life. So I think I and perhaps many writers, don't really have it all worked out. They don't work with a formula. There are other things which also happen. It's when you're working with different medium all the time when you're expressing yourself. So when you're thinking it in your head, it's a different journey. When you're putting it on paper, it's already opening up something else
Hmm.
somewhere.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when you're thinking it
Hmm.
here, you cannot possibly know what will happen on paper.
Hmm.
And that is opening up other possibilities, which you discover as you go
Hmm.
ahead on
Hmm.
the paper.
Hmm.
So I think for me also there's a lot of, not I think, I know,
Hmm.
there's a lot of unpredictability
Hmm.
in where the work is going. But to think that it is without a plan,
Hmm.
that would be a mistake.
Correct.
I mean, there is a plan which is getting worked out as you go along. There is a balance. I always say, there's an intuitive aesthetics
Hmm.
which is guiding me along and
Hmm.
telling me what may be and what may not be. It's still a risk. You may
Hmm.
still make a mistake.
Hmm.
But the point is, it's there to give some method to your madness.
And do you rewrite a lot?
I don't know what to say because I like to write I mean, I write several drafts,
Hmm.
that's for sure, and that is why I'm a slow writer. I've never been in a hurry, and I've never thought how many books am I going to write in my life. If I'm going to write one book in 10 years, then how much can I really produce? I've never
Yeah.
thought things like that,
Hmm.
but um, I write several drafts quite slowly, but I always try to write my first draft in as inspired a moment and place as I can find.
I see.
And that draft, in some sense, is the foundation.
Hmm.
And the foundation does not really change. After that, I keep um, as a fellow writer has given me this word, so I use it repeatedly. He says that, we keep tinkering with it. So every time I work on the draft again, I'm tinkering with it. And, in this book, for instance, I didn't set out to write a book which will take me to the partition of India.
Yeah. That.
But when the partition happened, when the main protagonist decided to jump across that border
Hmm.
as well,
Yeah.
and the last section became majorly about partition,
Yeah.
then naturally, when I would have done the next draft, some bits of that, I mean, I already
Bit.
knew that journey, it's
Hmm.
a different
Hmm.
process when you already
Hmm.
know the base draft.
Yeah.
So then some of those clues came
Yeah.
in the beginning as well.
Mm. In
So.
fact, we'll come to that partition bit in a minute, because it comes as a real surprise even to the reader that, one never expect this 80-year-old Amma Mai to suddenly want to go to Pakistan, and we'll just come to that. I just
The
had one.
surprising thing is, I mean, I would have, when my protagonist did it, I would have, if I had stopped to think, I might have thought, my God, is it possible? How unbelievable is it? Etc., etc. But as it turns out, it's quite a common thing.
Yeah, it
It seems
seems
lots
very
of
seamless
men and
and
women in
yeah,
that sort of age have decided to
want to
jump
do.
across and manage to get,
Mm.
to the
Mm.
other side.
Mm. But before we come to that, I want to talk a little bit about the Pakistan portion in detail. But I want, the writing bit is one, for a writer, for an author. The other are these, these observations. I mean, these really minute observations about day-to-day things like you know, so many methods to find a lost object in a quilt. For instance, there's a beautiful passage about that. So so is it, how does that occur? I mean, I know it's not very easy to say how it occurs. I mean, I suppose that is a talent and sheer genius of a writer. But do you store these things in your mind and then they come out when you write, or do you like actually note them down sometimes?
I don't know what makes one a writer, but surely, I mean, observation and interest in observing and storing things one observes, reflecting on those, that becomes part of your nature. So it's not, I mean, again, I'm not the kind of writer who's sitting and, making
Making some
little
list.
observations and, making an object of you and deciding this is how I'm going to write it. But it just becomes my way of being, that I'm picking up little details, interesting details, and there is something called imagine. I mean, give me
Of
credit
course.
for some
No,
imagination,
no,
but
it
so
is
there,
sheer genius.
yeah,
Actually,
no, I
it's
don't,
like
well, genius is a
you're
big
so
word to use.
as a reader, you're so stuck that how can that you think of such a thing at such a point.
No, well, I mean, that's a huge, big word you've used. I'll never be able to use that. But the point is that there is, after all, I call them the two beasts,
Mm.
creativity and imagination,
Mm.
who you cannot tame, who visit you and
Mm.
make you do all kinds of strange things, make you do sometimes things which fascinate you also, and they're utterly
Mm.
wonderful. So I
Mm.
think there are observations which you have, and these beasts, as I call them, of imagination and creativity, pick them up and fly off and do some strange things, like have a whole flock of crows flying
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
book and standing. I mean, somebody said, what? I mean, their desire, their dreams. Well, I never thought dreams and desire equals crows,
That's
but
true. Yeah.
this
It
is how
comes.
it all formed a picture,
Yeah.
and it pleased me too.
Mm. And the characters, of course, there is Amma, there is Beti, but this Rosie, I mean, character, which is again, it's so unusual in some ways to have this old lady strike up this, or is it not unusual, to strike up this friendship with this transgender person, and they are having such a ball. I mean, they're trying to imitate birds whistle. They're it's as if the Amma's childhood is back in many ways. She's really become a little girl again, and it's true friendship.
Well, to that, I mean, let me say two things. One, um, we have certain stereotypes, and those stereotypes are not meaningless. They
Mm.
do tell us something about people and life and the world. But stereotypes also blind us to some other things which are actually equally common.
Mm.
So we have a stereotype about old people becoming completely disinterested in life and retiring and being ready to die
Mm.
or waiting just to die. And we think that the other way of being in old age, being very, very interested in life,
Mm.
being, sort of being ready to have a new innings
Mm.
and beating young people at it almost,
Mm.
that seems to us strange if you only stick to the stereotype. But look around you, it's not so strange.
Yeah.
There are, elderly people, and, just loads and loads of them
Mm.
who are absolutely still enamored of life. Their body doesn't keep pace, but they're still, wanting to dance,
Yeah.
wanting to do everything, and sometimes enjoying a freedom which they did not have before, and therefore wanting to do the things which they could not do then.
Mm.
And I've forgotten the second thing I was going to say. I thought I said what
you
was
said you said two, yes.
yes, what was the question? Just briefly repeat it.
No,
Whatever.
about Rosie, I was, actually we were talking about,
Rosie.
how
Yeah,
that
yeah,
this
yeah,
elderly woman,
yeah,
like a dadi we all know,
yeah.
suddenly strikes up this unusual friendship
Well,
with.
so yeah, so
Hmm.
I mean, I was just going to say, see, one thing which again happens very naturally with writers, and all the writers sitting here will, I think, agree with me,
Mm.
is that we have a very, very natural tendency to look at people and things which have not been looked at enough, which deserve more attention that they've got than they've got, which have been bypassed or not given the acknowledgement and respect they deserve. So anyway, I think it's natural for writers to be attracted to the less heard and the less seen,
Hmm.
or the unseen and the
Hmm.
unheard.
Hmm.
So Rosie coming in is not surprising,
Hmm.
even without any such intention when I sat down to write.
Hmm.
On the other hand, I mean, rosies, we are surrounded by rosies, you know.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
there must be some reason, that
Yeah.
she's there in my consciousness.
Hmm.
And about somebody like Amma having a friendship with her, again, I think it's not so unnatural.
Hmm.
And I mean, it is in the course of conversations like this that it came up, and I spoke of my mother, who's now 96 and touch
Wow.
wood with
That's good.
us, yes, and
Hmm.
um, all there, but body is weak.
Hmm.
So my mother used to take a walk in a public garden,
Hmm.
and there used to be a transgender person who would, at some point, maybe return from somewhere. And if she happened to see my mother, out of respect, she would just hold her hands
Hmm.
and greet her.
Hmm.
And this happened fairly, often. And one of those times, my mother was, sitting on a culvert in the garden, taking a little rest, and this woman came along and she did namaste, and my mother said, "Come sit." And she said, "No, no, no." She thought that was, just
Hmm.
not done.
Hmm.
And my mother said very naturally that, "No, no, come, sit
Hmm.
here."
Hmm.
And then she started coming and sitting there next to my mother,
Hmm.
and they would have conversations. And my mother would talk about her life, and I don't know what she talked to my mother
Hmm.
about. The strange thing is, I do not know what their conversations were. I do not know this woman. I remember only once I was leaving and she was coming from somewhere, and my mother said, "This is my daughter."
Hmm.
And she put her hand on my head.
Hmm.
That is the only encounter I had with
Wow.
her.
How interesting.
And all I know is that my mother was very natural. She said, "नहीं उसमें क्या है?
Hmm.
नहीं, अरे ये क्या बात होती है? आओ बैठो यहाँ." My
Hmm.
mother is no sort of modern feminist. She
Yeah.
has none of those
Yeah.
ideological
Yeah.
lines in her, which a lot
Yeah.
of us may have
Yeah. It just
about
from
equal.
within
It
itself.
was just very, very natural
Yeah.
for her. She, तुम भी इंसान, मैं भी इंसान, आके बैठो ना. And they were talking. I never questioned, I never interviewed her about बात क्या आप करती थी, क्या उसकी जिंदगी थी, nothing. But somewhere that moment stayed with me and found its way
Way
into the
here.
book.
Hmm.
So how these things happen,
Hmm.
is even a writer's guess.
Hmm. Hmm.
It just
Hmm.
stays there and looks for its moment, and there it is.
Fantastic. The other, we'll come to the Pakistan portion, which I was really fascinated to read about. I don't want to give out any spoilers here, but an incident happens, and actually, in Rosie's memory, Amma wants to go to Pakistan. It's not really for herself that much. And then the last portion
So
is
it is for herself also.
also okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, with that.
So she goes to her old house.
That's true. But initially, it is to with that Chironji that it's what?
I would say Chiranji is more the cover.
Okay.
I mean, they wanted to go together.
Okay, yeah,
Rosie wanted to
which
go. For
didn't,
Rosie, it was easier.
unfortunately,
Yeah, they
didn't.
couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the last, so, but the way Pakistan, it's so evocative. The Pakistan comes, the Gali, Gucha, the Registan, the desert, the Hawa, I mean, that kind of. So, have you been to Pakistan? It's, I mean, all these is not necessary. It's as a writer, you can, think about it and imagine it.
Again, I will say not either or and both, in the sense that, as it happens, I have been to Pakistan once and I've seen a little of it, sure. But the other thing is that it's not just that trip,
Hmm.
that short trip that I made, which taught me about Pakistan.
Cannot be.
Yeah,
It's, yeah.
it is. Pakistan is something we are living with, from childhood, especially in North India. I mean, I won't speak
Yeah.
of other parts of India, but North India, much of North India and several states in North India have such a fraught
Yes.
history. that all of us know, Pakistan and those stories, whether or not our own family has, directly been through those.
Hmm.
So those stories are my stories. That nostalgia, that pain, that questioning, that everything which, that anger too,
Hmm.
a lot of people have that.
Hmm.
All that is something I have grown up with, and it has filled my imagination. I know those stories, I feel for them, and it's not a one trip which
Mm.
is going to
Absolutely,
come
because
out there.
yeah, it is, it cannot, that's true. It's so much there is about it. And in the end, it is really a call for, a compassion. I mean, if there is a message of sorts in the book, it's really to be, it's a very, in the end, that how we can, friendship and compassion. I mean, that's what one, takes away in the end, I think. Though there is bit towards the end of the book where Gitanjali, you also, there's such a plea for literature to survive, for to literature to live. How important literature is in the scheme of things, where one, it seems that, there is a little waning of interest towards reading among the youngsters. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? How, what a life affirming thing literature itself.
I'll try. I mean, that's a huge thing to reply to. So I'm
Yeah.
not very confident that I can express it in short and very effectively. But see, one thing is when you said, sort of the book is about compassion and living together with love and understanding. I think really it is probably true of all literature, isn't it? Literature is about compassion for humanity. It is a plea for humanity. It is a plea for compassion and love. It is a plea for preserving and protecting relationships and the world rather than destroying it. Even when it is a book, filled with despair and filled with anger, it is because the writer is concerned for things that are going wrong and going in this other direction. So I think
Hmm.
what this the message of this book is really the message of all art and literature.
Hmm.
Um, about sorry, again I forgot the second bit.
No, that's what. So I would, the plea that you
Literature,
make for
the
literature
place for
itself.
literature. Well, plea for literature. I think literature. Well, look at today's world, where we talk. I mean, our rhetoric is so much about tolerance and humanity, etc. But look at the way it's unfolding. Look at the market and the politics
Mm.
of the world, and how it is actually um, creating so many divisions, so many misunderstandings, so much what's it called, mutual suspicion. Someone recently said in a conversation, he said कि कभी कभी तो लगता है कि इंसान सिर्फ इंसान के खिलाफ नहीं हो रहा है, हर इंसान हर कुछ के खिलाफ होता जा रहा है. जैसे कि आज it's all about just being against,
Hmm.
everything else.
Hmm.
So in such a world and so much intolerance,
Hmm.
in such a world, literature remains, art and literature is one place where I think dialogue is still possible. I mean, look at our last session. You can express differences, but you do it with friendship.
Hmm.
It is
Yeah.
about it is about tolerance. It is about dialogue being the way. It is about enjoying, celebrating life, celebrating humanity. So I think literature and space are also literature and art are also the space which is about quiet and reflection, which is about really all the beautiful emotions we could have. It is about enjoyment. It is about thinking kindly.
Hmm.
It is about thinking with love, feeling with love. So I think it is such a beautiful and constructive
Hmm.
place
Hmm.
to hold together. And that is why I think literature festivals, with
Yeah.
all the other problems we may, you know,
Absolutely. It's a, yeah.
accuse them of,
Yeah.
are wonderful things.
Yeah.
I mean, they're celebrating art and literature and dialogue.
Hmm.
So I think there's
Hmm.
every reason
Hmm.
to protect this
Hmm.
space and speak up for
Hmm.
it.
Hmm. There is also, rather few uncharitable remarks about journalism in the book, which I wouldn't get into right now. But but Geetanjali, one when reads again, it's not too much in your face, but your work is very political. The books, the books that you write in, there is an understated politics there in many stories, many instances, many small observations that you make. So you think a writer, an artist, has to reflect the times that they are in, and politics is definitely a major role in their lives.
See, I don't know what your definition of politics is. If it is overt politics that you're talking about, then I'm sure different writers will choose
Mm,
or have a different relationship with politics. But if you are talking of it's there in small ways and it's there in its implications, etc., then I would say that look, politics is there in everything, really.
mm,
And I, as a woman, would give the example that just being a woman today is like being politics incarnate because
yeah.
everything becomes loaded. The
Mm,
fact that I can speak is political. The
mm,
fact that I have to shut up is political.
yeah.
The fact that I sit with my legs crossed is political. The fact that I decide to
Mm,
sit with my legs apart is
mm,
political.
mm,
Everything. I mean, as somebody said, that, a woman blinks, and that also has a political implication. So if you say it in that way, then look, I mean, we are living in times which
mm.
are hugely political, and whatever we say has political implications, and surely it comes into my work. But you didn't want to bring in journalism. I will, because
No,
I
though
think
both your characters are journalists, KK and Betty.
right, okay. No, I don't think I'm at all against journalists,
No,
and
no, I
I
was
think
just
journalists,
joking.
yeah, but I think and they're doing very important work. But I think the what is to be realized is the time, the I don't know how to say it, but the जो काल है
Mm,
साहित्य का,
mm,
वो अलग होता है, और जो काल है दूसरी विधाओं का, वो अलग होता है। और इसको हम नहीं समझेंगे तो हम हमेशा गड़बड़ करेंगे, क्योंकि हम फिर साहित्य से वो उम्मीद करने लगेंगे कि वो भी एक फौरी काल के लिए लिखे।
mm.
अभी जो हो रहा है उसको यहाँ रिफ्लेक्ट करना जरूरी, वो हो भी सकता है करे और ना भी करे, क्योंकि ये एक दूसरे काल के लिए लिखता है, ये सिर्फ अभी के लिए नहीं लिखता
So
है।
well said. Yeah.
And journalists have to,
Yeah.
they're doing something very important, but they have to write about
Yes.
now.
Of
You
here
have to
and now.
deal
Yeah.
with here and now.
Mm.
The pressure on you to deal with here and now is different. You don't sometimes even have the time to go slow and
Yes.
reflect, because you have to do something immediately.
Yes.
A writer doesn't and should not have that pressure.
Yeah.
So my request to people often is that leave the writer alone to take her time. And it is very unfortunate, but sometimes in taking her time, the writer may even get out of sync with the immediate world,
Yes.
because I'm still stuck with something and I'm going on. But look, these things have a longer span, and the writer is reflecting on them in that quieter, longer span way. It may or may not have an immediate effect, answer, impact, but it is something which requires that kind of quiet and length of time and reflection. So I just want to say that
Sure.
there is this
Yeah.
kind of difference, and there's a different kind of politics therefore involved.
It has been really very engrossing. Do we have little bit time? I would like her to read a little bit from the book, if 5 minutes, if there is. And oh, there are questions also. Anyway, it's only lunch next, isn't it? We can take 5 minutes. Uh-huh. Geetanjali ji, मुझे जो that there is this one rat exchange in the book. When she's thinking, if I do something, it's this, and if you do something, it's. Would you like to read a little bit from maybe that part or any other part that? I think there are also people who went to ask you. Okay, sure. Yeah. Is it on the mic? It's
Oh. Much as I appreciate the fact that the book has come out in English and therefore other readers could read it and therefore it got a global sort of exposure and it's, done good things for me. I am very attached to the real book, the original, which is Ret Samadhi. So, so I'm going to read from the book, yes. Now, I think you've already mentioned that the book is set in North India and it's in the family. And this little chapter is about the daily bickerings that go on in the families. Daily bickerings, जो कभी कभी ऐसी छोटी नोक झोंक रहती हैं, थोड़े अनप्लेजेंट होती हैं, फिर ठीक हो जाती हैं, और कभी कभी बिल्कुल बंटवारा परिवारों में भी हो जाता है, खून खराबा भी हो जाता है, पता नहीं क्या क्या नहीं होता. तो ये परिवार के उस तरह के जो रोज रोज चलता है उसके बारे में है. कहना चाहिए परिवार को, जबकि कहते हैं महाभारत को, कि जो दुनिया में वो उसमें और जो उसमें नहीं वो कहीं नहीं, कवि के तसव्वुर में भी नहीं. यानी भूला भटका आतंकवादी, गर्मा भरमा वामपंथी, नारीवाद और नारी, हरवादी और जीती हारी, सब परिवार में या महाभारत में जिसे जैसे रुचे पचे. महाभारत में दुनिया, दुनिया परिवार में, और इसलिए परिवार में महाभारत. जो रोज रोज के हंगाम, हर एक महाभारत. इसलिए परिवार के हर सदस्य को पता है कि जो मुझ में वो किसी में नहीं, और जो मुझ में नहीं वो होने लायक नहीं. और ये कि मेरे पास दिमाग है, औरों के पास पैसा. और ये कि मेरा फायदा उठाया सबने, अब हम नहीं बाकी करें. और ये कि हम दूर रह के भी रहम दिल, तुम वहीं हो पर कितने बेरुखे. और ये कि हमेशा हम ही देते हैं, आप हमेशा लेते हैं. और वाह आपकी सूझ, जिसमें आप तो मिलनसार, हम वही तो मतलबी यार. आप चुप तो विनयशील, हम चुप तो काइयां. आप करें सो शिष्टाचार, वही हम करें तो लल्लो चप्पो. आप कहें तो साफ गोई, हम कहें वही तो बदतमीज. हम पूछ लें तो अश्लील जिज्ञासा, आप पूछें तो हमदर्दी. हम करें तो हमारी सुविधा, आप करें तो आपकी कृपा. हम करें तो कंजूस, आप करें तो किफायती. हम चुप तो घमंडी, आप चुप तो शर्मीले. हम तो बड़े सीक्रेटिव, पर आप तो बस रिजर्व्ड. और हमारे फैशनेबल कपड़े नकल, आपके जमाने से कदम ताल. और हमारा गया तो ऐसा क्या बवाल, आपका गया तो लुट गए हाय हाय. और हमने किया तो क्या किया, और आपका इरादा वो भी किया. यानी हम वो जो हमने किया, आप वो जो आपने सोचा. और हमने कहा तो कटाक्ष, आपने कहा तो मजाक. और हमने अपनी बताई तो मियां मिट्टू, आपने बताई तो सहज सत्य. और हमने पा लिया तो हथियाया, आपने पाया तो आपका अधिकार. और हमने कहा तो हमारा गुमान, आपने कहा तो आप तो हैं ही सही. और हम गुस्साए तो ह्यूमर की कमी, आप गुस्साए तो आत्मसम्मान. और हम कर गए तो कर्तव्य था, आपने किया तो बड़प्पन हुआ. और हम सफल तो आपका सहारा जो मिला, और आप असफल तो हमने अड़ंगे जो डाले. और जी हम रह गए तो हम काहिल, आप रह गए तो आप त्यागी. और जी हम न समझे तो पैदल, आप नहीं तो भोले. और जी आपको हमसे वैर तो हम इसी लायक, हमको आपसे वही तो हम ईर्ष्यालु. और जी हमने किया तो स्वार्थ, आपने वही तो परमार्थ. और गर हम न करें तो बेपरवाह, मगर आप न करें तो मजबूरी. और हमने जितना किया सो कम, आपने जरा भी सो ज्यादा. और हमारी नाक टेढ़ी तो बदसूरत, आपकी आंख टेढ़ी तो कलात्मक. और जी अपनी तस्वीर अच्छी तो फोटोग्राफर माहिर, आपकी अच्छी तो आप सुंदर. और जी हम गोरे तो छिली बटेर, आप सफेद तो आप तो विलायती लगे. हम काले तो बैंगन भट्ट, जबकि आप काले तो ब्लैक इज ब्यूटीफुल। हम मोटे तो खाऊ पेटू, आप मोटे तो रौनक चमक। हम दुबले तो सूखी लकड़ी, आप सीख तो सौम्य सजल। और हम चलाएं एसी तो अय्याश, आप चलाएं तो सेहत नाजुक। हम पिए तो शराबी, आपने पी तो डॉक्टर की हिदायत। हमारी जबान अंग्रेजी तो शो ऑफ हम, आपकी तो शिक्षित आप। और जी आपका काम काम और हमारा काम तमाम। यस जी, नो जी, हम जी, तुम जी, और हम और तुम और तुम और हम और अम्मा, और इतना हमने किया और तुम साथ होके न देखते। और बेचारी बुढ़ा गई और पड़ी रही और अकेली और जानती भी नहीं क्या कर रही है, और नाम भी गलत सलत दे रही है, दिमाग पर है असर, और सब के सब दौड़ पड़े। शुक्रिया।
Thank you very much, Geetanjali. Thank you. Very nice. Fantastic.
Wow,
Super.
that was truly magical.
I think
Thank
there
you
are
so
some
much,
people
ma'am.
wanting to have some.
Yeah, we have some questions.
Go ahead,
that-
sir.
Yeah. May I request the volunteers to be here, please?
पहले आप पूछेंगे, मैं पूछ। मैं इस मौके की तलाश में थी कि कहीं ना कहीं मैं और आप आमने सामने हो ही जाएंगे, दोनों छाया अनुवादों के मारे हुए हैं। मैंने ये कहना चाहती हूँ कि बहुत अच्छा लगा, बड़े दिनों बाद अपनी हिंदी अपने लिखे की अस्मिता को लेकर खड़ी हुई तुम, क्योंकि मुझे ये लगा था कि दब जाएगी रेत की समाधि में तुम्हारा अपना लिखा। इतनी उसकी चर्चा उठ गई तो लगने लगा कि जैसे सैंडस्टोन ही तुमने लिखा हो। तो कई कई बार अनुवाद भारी पड़ जाता है अपने लेखन पर। तुम्हारी आत्मा कभी कसमसाती है? माने I'll make it one liner कि do you feel constrained? Would you like to talk about in अपने रचना
I
में?
missed the last two lines. आपने कहा कभी कभी ट्रांसलेशन भारी पड़ जाता है ओरिजिनल पर।
हाँ, पर मैंने ये कहा आपसे कि जो आपने ओरिजिनल लिखा है ना, जो किताब आज से सालों पहले लिखी, उसका अपना उन्वान है, उसका अपनी जवानी है। अब जब चर्चा होती तो कभी दिल में दर्द होता है कि अपना लिखा इस समय पीछे जा रहा है, इस समय अनुवाद ही आगे आ रहा है, जिसमें खुद मैं कहूँ कि गीतांजलि श्री खो रही है। ये ऐसा होना चाहिए।
मेरे लिए देखिए, इस तरह का कोई ना पशुपेश है मेरे मन में, ना इसको लेकर किसी भी तरह का मैं कहूँ कि कोई गलतफहमी है। किताब रेत समाधि है, जितनी भाषाओं में आएगी उसको एक और दुनिया मिलेगी। उसके लिए मैं ग्रेटफुल हूँ। ये मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है। अंग्रेजी आज के ज़माने में अंग्रेजी का बोलबाला है, अंग्रेजी की दुनिया, उसमें हमें बहुत सी और दिक्कतें भी हैं इसके कारण, लेकिन अंग्रेजी की दुनिया विशाल है, तो इसको एक विशाल पाठक जगत मिल गया, उसके लिए आई एम ग्रेटफुल। पर ये समझना मेरी किताब पीछे जाती है, जी नहीं, वो टूम ऑफ सैंड हो या किसी भी भाषा में आए, वो रेत समाधि है। टॉल्स्टॉय की अन्ना कैरेनिना है। आप उसको जिस भाषा में पढ़ पाए, आप खुश होइए कि हम पढ़ पाए हैं उसको। हम नहीं रूसी में पढ़ पाते, हम खुश हैं कि उसका हिंदी और अंग्रेजी अनुवाद आया, तो हम टॉल्स्टॉय की अन्ना कैरेनिना पढ़ पाए। इस तरह से।
We have another question.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am Devashish. From your book, in your guru, Sopti ma'am, you can't hear me? Yeah. So your guru, your inspiration, Sopti ma'am. So what is that one chapter or one portion which you think has had a large influence of your guru on that particular portion of your writing? From this Tomb of Sand.
No, I'm sorry, I don't have one chapter, or I'm not that kind. I don't have that kind of favorites, and I'm my own work. I'm rarely able to say this is my favorite.
If the guru has influenced one particular portion,
no, influence doesn't mean that there's one chapter which I will say Krishna ji की वजह से मैंने किया है, ऐसा नहीं है. The influence is much more, it's unobtrusive. It just, it's an inspiration from writers I have absolutely admired and learned from. But ultimately, listen, I hope my work has Geetanjali Shree signature.
Obviously, yes. Yes.
It's not trying to be Krishna Sopti or anybody else. So
Right.
there is no chapter that I could point out in that
Oh,
way.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. We'll take, we have two more hands, and these are the last two questions. We'll not take any more questions.
I've been listening to you, I think 3-4 times now, and it's delightful every time. Exactly like reading your book. You know, I think of it as a patchwork quilt. कहीं भी उठा के 4 पेज पढ़ लो, मजा आता है, because it gives you a new vista. So thank you very much. I have one
Thank
quick
you.
question. That passage you read out, did you write it in one go or did it take time?
My first draft is usually a writing in one go. And that is why, like I said in the course of the conversation, I always try to write my first draft in a very undistracted moment where I can just, when I know that I have a whole month or two entirely to myself and I can just devote it to that. So my first draft is in one go. After that, I keep working in bits. I leave it, I come back to it, etc.
We have just one more question. The lady in pink there. We'll close questions here.
Hello. So, ma'am, I really agree to the fact that certain work actually transcend language. And can you hear me? Yeah, so I'm just saying that I totally agree that certain work can actually transcend language. And I basically write poems, but I have recently started learning how to write story. And I can say that your book has broken certain writing rules or techniques. So I just wanted to ask, like, how confident you are that if the mother doesn't get up for around 200 pages, or if you do an entire chapter on crows, it will still work out, because I enjoyed reading Tomb of Sand. So, yeah.
I think I write without any sense of anyone looking over my shoulder and telling me how to write. As breaking rules is concerned, I mostly don't know myself that I'm breaking any rules.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, ma'am. There was one thing you said which is going to stay with me. Where do these murmurs and whispers go? They took the corners of the rooms, and I think all of these beautiful words that we exchanged today are going to take places inside this room and is going to stay with us. Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful session. Please stay on stage. We need to felicitate Mr. Praveen Kumar for Amar Deswa. We missed him earlier in the morning, so we'll just felicitate him, award him, and if you would please do the honors. Maybe please have a big round of applause. We'll break for lunch after this. I would just like to announce that we also have some other parallel sessions going on at Bowling Alley as well as at Suraj Mahal instead of Deep Mahal. There are multiple sessions going on, all interesting, all amazing, with amazing writers from across the globe. Please attend and share with your friends. If you're taking photos, do not forget to post on social media and tag Kalinga Literary Festival. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir, for being here and for the wonderful discussion. We also have goodies from Amul India. These are gifts from Amul India, and hope it's going to be as sweet as Amul is. Yes. Thank you. We can all please break for lunch. I mean, I am hungry. I know you must all be for sure. So let's go have our food and return here for our other session at 1:45 p.m.